My fiancée convinced me to exclude my 4-year-old daughter from our wedding, but when I discovered she secretly planned to include her kids and 8 others, I canceled it in front of 100 guests, and they never saw what I did next coming. I'm 38 years old, I work in accounting, and 3 weeks ago, I canceled my wedding, literally on the day of the ceremony, in front of all the guests, with the photographer already taking pictures and the food ready on the tables in my parents' backyard. I know it sounds dramatic and maybe even cruel, but when you hear what happened, you're going to understand why I had no other choice. The truth is, I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there, but I guess when you're in love or think you are, you put on these rose-colored glasses that don't let you see reality. You know what I mean? I met Catherine about 2.5 years ago at a work conference, one of those boring ones where everyone is half asleep after lunch. She was 40 years old, worked in human resources for a big company, and honestly, I thought she was incredible from the start. She was smart, funny, had this confidence that I admired, you know, like she knew what she wanted in life. We started talking, went out a few times, and things flowed pretty well at first. She had 2 kids from her previous marriage, a 10-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl. And I had my daughter, Ava, who was 12 at the time. My ex-wife and I had divorced when Ava was 7, and since then it had basically been me and her against the world. I mean, her mom is in Ava's life, but she lives in another state and sees her like twice a year. So I'm the present parent, the one who goes to school meetings and makes breakfast and all that. The first few months with Catherine were great. Seriously. The 4 of us would go out together sometimes. Her kids were good kids. A bit shy, but nothing weird. Ava seemed to get along with them, or at least, that's what I thought. Catherine and I complemented each other well. We had the same professional goals. We laughed at the same things. And after about a year and a half, I decided to propose to her. I did it at a fancy restaurant. Nothing too extravagant, but romantic, and she said yes through tears. And all the drama. I remember that night I got home and told Ava, expecting her to be happy or at least pleased, but her reaction was kind of lukewarm, you know? Like she said, "Oh, that's nice, Dad, congratulations," but without much emotion. At the time, I attributed it to her being a 4-year-old teenager, and you know how they are at that age, always on their phone and kind of in their own world, so I didn't think much of it. First mistake. We started planning the wedding, and that's when Catherine dropped the bomb on me. We were sitting in my living room with a bunch of wedding magazines on the coffee table, and she tells me out of nowhere, "Christopher, I've been thinking, and I think we should have a child-free wedding." I was like, "What?" Because we literally had 3 kids between the 2 of us, and she explains that no, she meant that the kids shouldn't be at the ceremony or the reception, that they should stay with babysitters or family members. That she wanted something more elegant. Tano, one, and adult, without the chaos of kids running around everywhere. And I said, "But Catherine, Ava is 14 years old. She's not exactly a small child, and besides, she's my daughter. How am I going to get married without her being there?" And she insisted, said that 14 still technically counts as a child, that her own kids weren't going to be there either, that it was so we could enjoy the day without worries. We had like 3 arguments about this, seriously. I didn't want to give in, but Catherine got super firm about it, said it was her wedding too, and she had a right to decide how she wanted it to be. She made me feel guilty, like saying that I didn't respect her wishes, that I always put Ava first before her, that we needed to start our life together as a couple and not as parents all the time. And I, like an idiot, ended up giving in. I told her it was fine, that we'd have the child-free wedding, that my sister could take care of Ava that day. When I told my daughter, I felt like the worst piece of trash in the world, seriously. Ava was sitting on her bed, doing homework, and I went in and said, "Look, sweetie, about the wedding, we decided it's going to be adults only, but you'll be able to come to the rehearsal dinner and all the other activities." She just looked at me and said, "Okay, Dad," nothing more. She didn't protest or get angry, just okay. And that hurt me more than if she had screamed or cried, because it was like she already expected me to disappoint her. But I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, that it was just one day, that Ava would understand eventually. The following months were weird. Catherine moved into my house about 3 months before the wedding, because her apartment lease expired, and it made sense, you know. We were going to be married soon anyway. But since she moved in, I noticed the relationship between her and Ava got kind of cold. Before they at least greeted each other and talked a bit, but after the engagement, Catherine basically ignored Ava. She'd come home and say hi. Hello, Christopher, how was your day? And if Ava was there, it was like she didn't exist. When I asked Catherine about this, she'd say, no, that I was exaggerating, that she was just stressed with the wedding and work. And I believed her, or wanted to believe her, because admitting there was a problem meant facing it, and I was like burying my head in the sand. 2 days before the wedding, I'm at my office finishing some reports because I wanted to leave everything ready before going on honeymoon, and I get an email notification. It was an email that Catherine had sent to her sister Hannah, but she accidentally forwarded it to me because I was in a family email group or something. I don't know exactly how it happened, but it arrived in my inbox. The subject said, Final confirmation. Kids, wedding. And I thought maybe it was about some guest's children or something. So I opened it, kind of distracted. And there it was, black and white. Catherine, writing to Hannah to confirm that her 2 kids were going to be at the wedding as page boys, and that Catherine's kids were also going to be there, and the nieces and nephews, basically like 8 kids total. It literally said, obviously don't tell Christopher anything about this. I already talked to the kids so they won't say anything. It'll be a nice surprise to see them all there dressed so formally. I stared at the screen for like 5 minutes, unable to process what I was reading. I mean, are you telling me this woman convinced me to exclude my own daughter from our wedding under the pretense that it was child-free? And all this time she planned to have her kids and all the nieces and nephews there? Seriously? My hands started shaking. I literally felt like I was going to throw up. I took a screenshot of the email immediately, saved it in like 3 different places because I wasn't going to let her deny this later, and I left the office. I drove home on autopilot, with my mind racing. I got there around 3 p.m. Catherine was still at work, and I found Ava in the living room watching Netflix. I sat down next to her and said, Ava, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. How have you been feeling about Catherine since we got engaged? She got kind of tense immediately. I could see it in her shoulders, and she told me, fine, everything's fine, Dad. And I said, Ava, please, I really need to know. And that's when she broke down, started crying, and told me everything. She told me that since the engagement, Catherine had completely changed with her, that she spoke to her super curtly when I wasn't around, that once she told her she looked fat in a dress she had bought, that when Ava tried to chat with her at dinners, Catherine only gave her one-word answers and then left. She told me she felt invisible in her own home, that sometimes she stayed in her room all afternoon just to not have to be around Catherine. And the worst part, what completely broke my heart, was when she told me, Dad, I know you're happy with her and I don't want to ruin that. That's why I hadn't told you anything. My 4-year-old daughter was enduring emotional mistreatment in her own home because she didn't want to ruin my happiness. Can you believe it? I hugged her and cried with her, apologized to her like 1,000 times, told her none of this was her fault, that I was the idiot adult who hadn't realized what was happening. She asked me what was going to happen with the wedding, and I told her, there's not going to be a wedding, honey. Don't worry about that. That night, when Catherine got home, I didn't say anything to her. I acted normal. We had dinner, talked about the last wedding details, and she didn't suspect anything. I had already decided what I was going to do, but I wanted to wait until the wedding day. I wanted her to feel exactly what I was feeling. That sensation that everything you worked for crumbles in a second. I know it. Sounds vindictive, and maybe it was, but at that moment it seemed fair to me. The next 2 days were the longest of my life, acting like everything was fine while inside I was boiling with rage. The wedding day arrived. It was a super sunny Saturday in June, one of those perfect days for an outdoor wedding. My parents had prepared their backyard beautifully. They had hired tents and tables and flowers. They had spent a ton of money. I arrived around 2 p.m. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. Catherine was already there, getting ready in one of the rooms at my parents' house with her bridesmaids. I was getting ready in another room with my best man. And around 3 p.m. I go out to see how everything's going. And guess what I see? Catherine's 2 kids running around the backyard in formal suits, the nephews playing near the chairs, the nieces in flower girl dresses. 8 kids total, just like the email said. None of the guests seemed surprised. Obviously, everyone knew except me. I went back to the room, told my best man I needed a minute, and took out my phone. I opened the screenshot of the email, looked at it again to make sure I wasn't dreaming all this, and mentally prepared myself for what I was going to do. At 4 p.m., I came out. The guests were already seated, like 80 people there waiting. The music started playing. I walked toward the altar where the officiant was waiting for me, and instead of standing there waiting for Catherine, I signaled the DJ to stop the music. The backyard went completely silent. Everyone was looking at me like, what's happening? Catherine came out of the house at that moment, looking incredible, honestly, in her white dress, all excited and smiling. She walked toward me with her sister Diane, who was her maid of honor, and when she got to the altar, I took out my phone. I said, loud enough for the guests in the front rows to hear, "Catherine, can you explain this to me?" And I showed her the screenshot of the email. I saw her face go from confusion to panic in like 2 seconds, and she tried to grab my phone, but I pulled it away. I turned to the guests and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I regret to inform you that there will be no wedding today. 2 months ago, Catherine convinced me to have a child-free wedding, which meant excluding my 4-year-old daughter from this ceremony. I discovered 2 days ago that she planned all this time to have her own kids here. As you can see, running around the backyard right now, while my daughter is at her aunt's house, because I made her believe no children could be present. I'm not going to marry someone who lies, manipulates, and mistreats my daughter." The backyard exploded in murmurs. People were getting up from their seats. Some of Catherine's guests tried to defend her. Her sister Diane started yelling at me that I was ruining everything, that I was overreacting. Catherine was standing there paralyzed with her hands covering her mouth, literally in shock. I gave her back the engagement ring I had in my pocket, put it in her hand, and told her, "You have until the end of the month to get your stuff out of my house." Then I left, walked out of the backyard, got in my car, and drove directly to my sister's house where Ava was. When I arrived, Ava was in pajamas watching movies. She saw me come in, still wearing the groom's suit, and asked me what had happened. I told her everything, showed her the email, explained why I had canceled the wedding, and she hugged me and said, "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for choosing me." We stayed there watching movies the rest of the night, ordered pizza, and it was the first time in months I saw my daughter genuinely happy and relaxed. The following days were total chaos. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages from Catherine's relatives telling me I was a monster, that I had publicly humiliated Catherine, that I should have handled things privately. Some of my own relatives were also upset because we had spent a lot of money on the wedding and I had canceled it so dramatically. But the truth is, I don't regret it. Not one bit. I blocked most of those people, only kept in contact with the people who really mattered to me and who understood my decision. Catherine tried to call me like 50 times the first few days, sent me messages like, "We need to talk." This was a misunderstanding. I can explain everything. I completely ignored her until I had to respond about the moving deadline. I sent her a short text like, "You have until the 30th of this month to get your stuff out. After that, I'm going to pack whatever's left and donate it." She responded begging me to talk in person, that she loved me, that she made a mistake but we could fix it. I didn't respond anymore. About 2 weeks after the incident, Catherine sent me a long message, like a 3-page essay, explaining her version. She said the reason she hadn't wanted Ava at the wedding was because she suspected Ava had been faking being sick during our engagement party the year before. Apparently, Ava had felt bad that day, with a stomachache, and I had taken her to the doctor the next day, and it turned out she had a real stomach infection, with diagnosis and everything. But Catherine was convinced Ava had faked it to get attention and ruin her special moment. She also said Ava was manipulative and had me wrapped around her finger, that I always defended her without questioning anything. Basically, she was blaming my daughter for everything. I showed Ava that message and asked her about the engagement party. She reminded me that that day she had been really sick, that she had thrown up in the morning before the party, but hadn't wanted to tell me because she knew it was important to me. She went to the party feeling terrible, endured like 2 hours, and finally had to tell me she felt bad because she was literally green. I took her to the doctor the next day, and they gave us antibiotics and everything. There was nothing to fake there. Medical diagnosis that proved it. Catherine had simply decided to believe her own narrative that Ava was the problem, and had built this whole justification in her head to treat her badly. About a week ago, I went to the house to pick up some things I needed for work. Catherine was still there. Technically, she had like 3 days left before the moving deadline. When I came in, she was in the living room, packing boxes. She looked horrible, honestly, without makeup and with dark circles. She saw me and her eyes filled with tears, started asking me again to reconsider. That we could go to couples therapy. That she had been under a lot of stress and had made mistakes, but she really loved me. She told me she had quit her job, that she had nowhere to go, that she was going to stay with her sister Hannah temporarily, but felt lost without me. And honestly, I felt some pity for her at that moment. I'm not going to lie. But then I remembered Ava's face crying on the couch, telling me she had been feeling invisible in her own home. And all that pity evaporated. I told Catherine, "I'm sorry, but I can't be with someone who treats my daughter like that. It doesn't matter how much stress you have or what excuses you make." I picked up my things and left. I haven't spoken to her since then. Right now I'm staying at a friend's house while Catherine finishes moving out. I don't want to be in the house at the same time as her. Ava is with me. We brought her most important things and she's sleeping in my friend's guest room. We're planning to go back to the house this weekend when Catherine is completely gone. I'm planning to take Ava to the beach next week, just the two of us, like a father-daughter trip to reconnect and leave all this drama behind. She's excited, says she hasn't been to the beach in years, and I just want her to know that I'm always going to be on her side. Is that I made a huge mistake. Not seeing it before, but it will never happen again. People keep asking me if I regret how I handled the cancellation, making everything so public and dramatic. And the honest answer is no. I don't regret it. Maybe I could have done it privately. Could have canceled the wedding a few days before and saved Catherine the public humiliation. But she lied to me for months, convinced her whole family to lie to me too, and more importantly, made my daughter's life miserable in her own home. So, no. I don't feel bad about how things ended. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions in a way that really hits them, you know? My parents lost like $15,000 on the wedding, and that does hurt me. I offered to pay them back little by little, but they said no. That they understood why I did it, and the money didn't matter, compared to my happiness and Ava's. My mom told me, "I'd rather lose the money than see you married to someone like that." And that meant a lot to me, honestly. My sister has also been incredible. She was the one who took care of Ava in the wedding day. And when I told her everything that had happened, she told me she had seen signs that something was wrong with Catherine, but hadn't wanted to interfere, that she wished she had said something before. I told her it wasn't her fault, that I was the one who should have paid more attention. As for Catherine, I don't know what's going to become of her, honestly. I know she's living with her sister Hannah now. I think she's looking for a new job. Part of me hopes she uses this as an opportunity to reflect on her behavior and change, but another part of me thinks she'll probably convince herself that I was the villain and she did nothing wrong. It's easier to blame others than admit your own mistakes, right? Her kids sent me messages asking what had happened and why we weren't going to be a family anymore, and that hurt quite a bit. They were good kids. None of this was their fault. I responded simply, told them their mom and I decided it was better not to get married, that I wished them the best. I wasn't going to get 10 and 8-year-old kids involved in all this drama. Yesterday, Ava asked me if I'm ever going to date someone else. If I'm going to try to have another relationship. I told her honestly I don't know, that for now I just want to focus on her and rebuilding the trust between us. She told me that if someday I meet someone new, she wants to meet her from the beginning this time, wants to be sure that person treats her well. And I promised her yes, that I'm never again going to let someone into our lives without her feeling comfortable and safe first. I learned my lesson the hardest way possible, but at least I learned it, I guess. Last week, Ava asked me if I thought Catherine had really loved me, or if it had all been a lie. And that made me think. Honestly, I don't know. I think maybe Catherine loved me in her way, or loved the idea of what we could be together, but clearly her love had limits, and those limits didn't include treating my daughter well. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters, right? You can love someone all you want, but if they can't respect and care for the people you love, then that love is worth nothing. That's what I've learned from this whole mess. So here I am, 38 years old, single again, temporarily living with a friend until my house is free of all the negative energy Catherine left there. But I have my daughter. Our relationship is stronger than ever, and in the end, that's all that really matters. Weddings can be canceled, money can be earned back, but you can't recover lost time with your daughter or repair the damage of putting her second. So yes, I canceled my wedding at the worst possible moment, in the most dramatic way possible, and ruined what was supposed to be Catherine's perfect day. And I'd do it again without hesitation.